Okay, so on the first of the series on installing Ubuntu with a preseed and then managing it with Ansible, here I've got one of my laptop setups, and it's an Asus E1215. This is one of the netbooks that we typically use for our student laptops. I've got it set to netboot. It actually gets its image from my fog server. Let me sit on down here. Gets its image from my fog server, so let me come down to my advanced menu, and I have a custom menu entry that says, I don't know if you can read that, install Xubuntu 64-bit. So we'll go on into that one. It net boots this setup right here. I mean, just generic boot loading. And it net boots an Ubuntu or an Xubuntu install, and then it installs from a preseed. The only thing it asks me for is the host name, and maybe eventually I'll automate that. But as it stands right now, there it is. Type in your host name. I'm going to go ahead and call it. Which one am I on? Number 5. I'm going into Miss Sheffield's classroom. And then there it is. It will move its way through the install process, making the user, setting up the networking, all that type of stuff. And the one thing, I install extra packages in the preseed. It has an OpenSSH server on it, so that when this thing is done, it will have a SSH server that I can use Ansible to manage with. There's the first step. Alright, I'll turn off the lights, maybe get this to focus a little bit better. The laptop is just finished installing, and so it's rebooting itself and coming back up in Xubuntu. It takes about an hour, but that's because I tell it to go ahead and get the package updates and install things like Java and stuff like that. You can see this is what it comes up to. It's just a regular Xubuntu install, and with my default user, password's all ready to go in and that type of stuff. So now, this is what it's going to come up to right after it installs. Let's go back over to my machine and let's do the Ansible side of it. Okay, so now I've come over to my desktop machine, and this is how I remotely administer my Ansible computers. I've got, as you can see, I've got a folder called Ansible, and then I've got one called Ubuntu Lab, and that I probably need to move that stuff. But as it pertains to what we're doing right now, these are my junior high laptops, and so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to edit the host file for my junior high laptops. It looks like this, and I've got them by teacher name. There's Wilson. Here's my CART lab. That's not necessarily the teacher's name. And in particular, I'm going to add my clients by DNS name because I've got a DNS server that picks all this up and it's dynamically updated and everything. So my new client has come up. It's Sheffield 06. And my Windows DNS server will associate its IP address with its DNS name. So I can now reach it by that DNS name. Okay, so once I can do that, we can do our Ansible script. Let me find it. It looks about like this. What I'm doing specifically on this one, because I'm doing just one client at a time, I'm running my Ansible playbook. I'm using the hosts file that I just edited right there, and this limit command is saying that I just want to limit it to one host off of that file. And so I'm doing number 6 right now. So and then I'm telling it I'm going to run my playbook, my Bootstrap playbook. My Bootstrap playbook, it copies over the required keys. It makes my user that I'm going to use, my remote user that I'm going to use to administer the computer with. And so basically I'm getting it set up the first time so that my administration after this is much, much easier. It's not going to require all this. I'm going to tell it I'm going to use my Dale user, which is what I create when I very first install the machine. I'm going to ask it for a password and ask it for a sudo. I'm going to use sudo to do it because I need to do it as root. And then this particular is some Python mumbo jumbo that allows me to do what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put in my password. It's going to, as SSH does, it's going to ask me if it's okay if I connect to that, if I add the RSA key to my known hosts. So I'm going to put yes in there. And then what Ansible is going to do is what Ansible does. It's going to run through that playbook. It's going to output that everything's going like it's supposed to do. I'm adding my pub key and my user remote. I am, there you go, disallowing SSH root access, disallowing some of that other stuff. And then my last task is to actually have it reboot. And so it reboots the machine. So right now you can't see this, but my laptop is rebooting. It's going to look exactly like it did before I ran my first playbook. But it will have these small changes. It'll have the remote user. I changed the root password. That's one of the first things that I do is I set the root password, and then it now will authenticate by SSH pub key, so I don't have to put any passwords or in. And so the next command that I'm going to run looks like this, and you can see it's a lot simpler. And it would be even more simple if I were doing it on multiple machines. So if I wanted to do everything in that host file, then I could take off this whole limit statement right here. I could leave all of that out if I wanted to do everything in the host file, or I could do it just by group or something like that. But on this one, same deal. I'm just going to do that Sheffield 06. Okay, my laptop is back up and running, and now I have a playbook that utilizes the roles feature, and it's called my junior high laptops.yml. And so I'm going to run that playbook now. That one is much more extensive, so as you'll notice when I hit play on this one, it's going to have a lot of options, and they're going to take a whole lot longer to get it done. That first one only took about, 10 or 15 seconds, and then it rebooted. This one updates the apt cache, so it's installing packages, and there's a pretty extensive list of packages it's going to do. Makes a lot of configuration changes, and so this script is probably going to take at least an hour to run. Per machine, but it's running completely independent of what I'm doing. It's doing all this behind the scenes. I'm not having to put anything in. If you'll notice, it didn't ask me for a password because it's pub key authenticated. It's setting up the machine with very little intervention from me. Same deal with this one. Once it gets to the end, I have a reboot task so that it'll reboot and come up looking exactly like it's supposed to do. I'm going to go ahead and pause video and come back when it's done and show you what it looks like. But those were the 3 setup steps. That's the entire process of getting a laptop ready. I do a unattended install, I bootstrap the machine, and then I run my playbook at it, and that's it. That's all. Alright, so my imaging process is done. My management process is done. And so the laptop is rebooting itself right now. You can see it go through the menu. I've configured the grub boot menu. See, I've got my own custom little blanket ISD boot logo on there. I've configured it to auto log in as a specific user. It's kind of a kiosk user, so I really lock it down. But that way you don't have to actually log on to the laptop to get onto it, to get to your applications and stuff. So it logs in as a default user. This is just how we set up our junior high laptops. I don't have them log in with Active Directory, things like that, all that type of stuff. We do the high school setups differently, and obviously in elementary differently, but it gives you your default Xubuntu splash screen while it's booting up. But once it gets booted up and logged in, you'll see the whole thing is configured start to finish the way that we have it configured as of right now. I'm sure as time goes on I'll probably make a few more changes and add some things and customize the configuration. Boot up time is not incredibly quick, but this is the first time that this particular user is logged on, and so it's got to make some default file, copy over some default files and stuff like that. So it ought to speed up just a little bit after this first boot. But I mean, this is a netbook style laptop. It's not the quickest thing in the world. It's got about 2 gigs of RAM, maybe 4. It's running about a 1.2 gigahertz. I've installed Conky by default, and then so that I can see my network configuration right there off of the desktop, so you'll see it go in a second. I've set the default wallpaper and set up panels and stuff. It's running XFCE, so I set up all the default panels and stuff like that. But you can see it's already connected to my Wi-Fi. It tells me my IP address and that type of information. There you go. Last thing, we use the iTalk management console to remotely administer our machine, so it should be set up. All that is key based, and there we go. Look at that. So iTalk, all the keys are copied over and everything. Let me shake the mouse over here. Look at that. So it's all ready to go. That is the setup that we use for our laptops, and required about 30 seconds of my intervention, start to finish. Not too bad. 3 steps.